Filipino fans didn't just show up to Roland Garros, they consumed it. What started as a grassroots movement became a global phenomenon that left tennis executives scrambling to understand the seismic shift unfolding on court Philippe Chatrier. Eala walked onto red clay as a rising talent. She walked out as a nation's sworn protector, a symbol of pride that transcended sport itself. Nobody saw it coming, but by the time the dust settled, the world had no choice but to bear witness. For years, the Philippines watched from the sidelines. Their athletes competed in basketball, boxing, and volleyball, sports where they'd built legacies. But tennis? That belonged to the West, to the elite academies of Europe and North America, to countries with centuries of Grand Slam pedigree. Then Eala emerged. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her rise defied every narrative tennis had constructed about talent and geography. A girl from Manila training in Mexico, pushing her way into the rankings when the world wasn't paying attention. Each victory was quiet. Each breakthrough was understated. The American networks barely acknowledged her ascent. The European press treated her as a novelty, impressive for a Southeast Asian, but ultimately a footnote. Yet something stirred beneath the surface. Every upload of her matches drew thousands of comments in Tagalog. Every interview sparked celebration across Filipino social media. Her parents' sacrifice, her humble beginnings, her relentless work ethic, these weren't just athletic achievements, they were cultural ammunition. A generation of Filipinos who'd grown up watching their countrymen dominate other sports now had a daughter of their own, challenging the gatekeepers of a sport that demanded wealth, connections, and geography. The whispers became louder, the support became organized, and when Roland Garros 2024 announced her entry, something shifted. It wasn't just another qualifier fighting for ranking points, it was a moment waiting to detonate. But nobody imagined what came next. The ignition happened on TikTok. A 45-second clip of Eala serving, focused, fierce, unstoppable, circulated through the Filipino diaspora like wildfire. Then Twitter erupted, then Facebook, then Instagram. The velocity was stunning. What had been a niche following of tennis enthusiasts transformed into a coordinated, passionate, relentless fan base spanning continents. In Los Angeles, Filipino nurses rallied their networks. In Toronto, university students organized watch parties. In Dubai, expatriate communities pooled resources. The messaging unified across platforms. This is our moment. This is our champion. It wasn't manufactured hype. It was organic combustion, a community recognizing itself in an athlete and deciding collectively that her journey would become their triumph. Journalists began noticing, sports analysts scrambled to understand the phenomenon. Radio stations in Manila ran segments exploring Eala mania. News outlets framed her entrance into Roland Garros not as a technical achievement, but as a cultural earthquake. The narrative shifted from talent to representation, from rankings to revolution. Social media engagement figures stunned the tennis establishment. Her pre-tournament posts garnered millions of impressions. Fan accounts multiplied overnight. Merchandise, unofficial, homemade, flooded with pride, appeared in every corner of the internet. Young Filipino girls began posting videos of themselves practicing tennis, citing Eala as inspiration. This wasn't admiration anymore. This was identification. A nation saw themselves reflected in a teenager on clay courts, and they refused to look away. By the time she arrived in Paris, the stage was already set. The audience wasn't just watching tennis, they were witnessing a claim on belonging, a declaration that excellence had no geography. What they didn't expect was how the entire tournament would transform around her. The invasion started early, flights booked months in advance, hotels overflowing. The first wave of Filipino supporters arrived in Paris 3 days before Eala's opening match, and tournament organizers immediately recognized the shift. This wasn't a typical crowd. This was an occupation, peaceful, joyful, but undeniably transformative. Court Philippe Chatrier had never witnessed anything like it. Tens of thousands of Filipino flags draped across sections, handmade banners in Tagalog, coordinated chants that echoed across the grounds. Security personnel exchanged confused glances. Vendors ran short on supplies. The infrastructure of Roland Garros, built for decades of predictable European patronage, suddenly accommodated a demographic that had never claimed this space before. The French organizers panicked, then adapted. They brought in translators. They scheduled additional security. They watched, with a mixture of bewilderment and respect, as Filipino supporters demonstrated the most organized, passionate, and respectful takeover the tournament had ever experienced. No violence, no destruction, just presence. Overwhelming, undeniable presence. Local Paris media dubbed it the Manila Invasion. Social media exploded with footage of the transformation. Tennis journalists filed reports comparing the atmosphere to the biggest moments in sports: Wimbledon's American waves, the US Open's home crowd energy, but amplified through the lens of representation and historical significance. Eala stepped onto the court and gasped. The roar was primal. It wasn't crowd noise. It was validation, protection, and expectation converging into pure sound. Fans held signs reading, "From Manila to the world," and "The first of many." Children sang the Philippine national anthem. Adults wept. Veterans of tennis coverage reported chills they'd never experienced at the sport before. Tournament ratings spiked. Broadcasters scrambled to accommodate the unexpected demographic surge. The story wasn't just about tennis anymore. It was about transformation, about a sport confronting its own boundaries and witnessing them collapse.
She played like the weight of a nation rested on her shoulders, because it did. Every serve carried expectation. Every volley represented thousands of prayers whispered across continents. Eala moved on the clay with an intensity that transcended sport. Her opponents noticed. Commentators remarked on her composure, her focus, her refusal to break under pressure that would devastate most teenagers. The victories came. They weren't easy. They were earned, contested, fought for in every point. But they came. Each win sparked celebrations that resonated beyond stadiums. In Manila, strangers embraced in shopping malls. In Singapore, workplaces paused for live updates. In Los Angeles, Filipino communities organized spontaneous parades. The Filipino media painted her not as an athlete, but a hero, a vessel for collective aspiration. Eala's interviews revealed vulnerability beneath the competition. She spoke about missing her family, about the pressure of representation, about understanding that her losses didn't belong to her alone. They belonged to millions watching at home. Those words destroyed audiences. She became simultaneously invulnerable on the court and devastatingly human in conversation. The emotional labor was visible. Observers noted her eyes after tough losses. Not devastation, but resignation to something larger than herself. She wasn't playing for rankings anymore. She was playing for history. The burden should have collapsed her. Instead, it seemed to elevate her. Sponsors approached. Media outlets requested interviews. Major brands recognized the unprecedented demographic engagement. But Eala remained grounded, conscious of her responsibility as representation. Every post, every statement, every public moment calculated, not for vanity, but for the millions watching. The icon was fully formed now, not through manufactured celebrity, but through the collision of talent, circumstance, and collective will. Then came the moment that would define everything. What Roland Garros witnessed in 2024 wasn't temporary, it was structural. After Eala's run, the tennis establishment couldn't ignore the seismic shift occurring beneath the surface. The sport had been challenged to expand, not just in players, but in audiences, in representation, in the very geography of belonging. The Philippines, historically absent from professional tennis, suddenly had a voice, a presence, a claim. younger Filipino athletes began entering academies with renewed confidence. Investment in tennis development increased across the Philippines. Streaming services negotiated better agreements for Southeast Asian markets. The infrastructure of opportunity, previously concentrated in wealthy Western nations, started diversifying. More significantly, the moment revealed something about sports itself, that excellence emerges everywhere, that talent doesn't respect geography, and that communities recognize themselves in representation with stunning velocity and devotion. Eala's presence didn't just inspire young Filipino girls to play tennis. It validated the existence of millions who'd never seen themselves reflected in their sport's highest stages. Tennis journalists debated whether this was a watershed moment. Had the sport's boundaries truly shifted, or would this remain an isolated phenomenon? Could other nations, other communities, replicate what Filipino supporters accomplished? The questions were consequential because the answers would determine sport's future. What remained undeniable: a teenager from Manila had walked onto the red clay of Roland Garros, and in doing so had fundamentally altered how the world perceived tennis, not as an exclusive Western domain, but as a truly global arena where every nation's children could claim their place. The takeover wasn't just about filling stadiums, it was about filling futures with possibility. Was this just a rivalry moment, or the foundation of something transformative for sports itself? This isn't just Eala's story. It's a reminder that sport's greatest moments transcend competition. They become movements, cultural catalysts that reshape who belongs, who's visible, and whose dreams matter on the world's biggest stages. The Philippines didn't just send a fan base to Paris. They sent a revolution wrapped in flags and held together by hope. If you believe sports should belong to everyone, if you want to see more moments like this, if you're ready to witness the next generation claim their place in tennis, subscribe now. Hit that notification bell, because the takeover has only just begun.